So in this craft challenge, I'm attempting to make 6 mosaic coasters using both vitreous tiles and ceramic tiles. If you'd like to have a go at this yourself, the tools I used were glue, just PVA, some coaster blanks, some tile nippers, some ready mixed grout and a plastic bag. I also had tools for scraping off the grout and a sponge and a plastic tub as well. So I picked up this set of 6 wooden coasters from Hobbycraft. I already had a wide selection of vitreous tiles and ceramic tiles left over from previous projects, but on both of those projects I used the tiles in their square form. But for this project I was planning on breaking them up into little pieces and doing what I'd call a proper mosaic. So I'm still a beginner at mosaic, so bear with me, and I hope that this video will be useful for other beginners, because sometimes I feel like the pros can just go a little bit too far into detail and not use, beginners equipment. We can't all go out and buy the best stuff just to have a play with a different craft medium. Anyway, my first job was to break up all of the tiles using the tile nippers. A simple case of placing the nippers and squeezing really tight until the tile breaks. Now, to avoid the tile pieces flicking themselves all around the room, and that did happen, I found that if I nipped the tiles inside a plastic bag, then they would all stay contained within the plastic bag. It was a little bit fiddly to do this, but it avoided a lot of mess, because you will get little tiny bits of tile just flying around, and protective goggles if you're worried they'll go in your eyes as well. All good ideas, but the plastic bag worked very well. The vitreous tiles were very, very easy to break, but the ceramic tiles were far too difficult for me to break up into little pieces. The vitreous tiles have got like little ridges on the back, whereas the ceramic tiles are quite a lot thicker. And I'm dealing with various autoimmune conditions at the minute, and that has weakened my upper body arm strength. So I had to pass the job of cutting down or breaking up the ceramic tiles to the muscle of the household. So I was armed with a bag of bits, and it was time to start arranging the tile pieces on the blanks. So I applied some high-tack PVA glue and set to work. So the vitreous tiles have got a beveled edge, which made placing the tiles level on the coaster quite hard to do. The pieces were super small, and on some of the really small pieces I couldn't even tell which was the top of the tile and which was the bottom. I did persevere though, and I should also mention that the glue was drying out as I worked, so I had to keep reapplying the glue. But also filling in the last few spaces was super fiddly. The ceramic tiles, however, were much easier to place and to arrange on the coaster. These were broken in quite a uniform way, with fewer smaller shards, and I didn't have any difficulty knowing which way up to place them. So once the coasters had dried, I was ready to use the grout. Now I do prefer the ready mixed grout, as the powder grout is pretty messy to mix up, and these pots are kind of relatively cheap and they can be picked up for just a few pounds in DIY shops, or if you're in the UK, Poundland does sell these. I started by grouting the edges of the tiles and then the tops, I'm using a glue spreader at this stage because I find it's really easy to press into the gaps. This is a really long and messy process. You need to push it right down into the gaps. You don't want any spaces, you don't want any rough edges. And once I was happy that I'd got enough grout on, I used the larger scraping tool to remove the excess grout. So it was at this point a tile came loose that wasn't glued down properly, and it happened again on the next one and the next one as well. So I did my best to put these tiles back in place, and then I decided to re-grout these areas when they were dry. I should just kind of step back a little bit though, because once the grout had been applied, I used a damp sponge to wipe the excess grout off the tiles. It's really best to try and get as much as you can off the surface at this stage, just to make life easier when it's dry for cleaning. A thin coat of leftover grout can be easily scraped off, whereas a thick, lumpy coating is a complete and utter nightmare. Once the sponge gets a bit too grouty, just rinse it out and keep sponging the tiles until they're reasonably clean. When they are dry, you can clean off the excess grout with a damp cloth, and thicker areas you could just use your fingernail or a hard piece of plastic. Now, because there were a few loose tiles in the initial grouting process, I re-grouted my tiles a couple of days later, repeating the whole process of filling, pressing and wiping to ensure a good finish. So once they were dry, I cleaned up the surface of the tiles. Now you might notice at this point that 2 of the coasters are missing. This is simply because I rejected 2 of them at this stage, because they both had bad tiles that had dried unevenly. I didn't have a smooth surface in which to put the mug on. There was a couple that were sticking up a bit too high and they weren't level. And I think that was because either I'd put some of the vitreous tiles in sideways, and with the ceramic one I hadn't noticed that a loose tile had poked out a little bit and the grout had dried with it sticking up a little bit. Annoying, but you know, I'm still a beginner. There are things that I miss. Hopefully if you give this a go, you won't. So the next process is to clean up the tiles, and it's really worth taking your time over this. Now I find using my fingernail works really well to just scrape off some of the grout, but mine are pretty tough. And if you've got weaker fingernails or false nails, you might want to use a piece of hard plastic like an old credit card or bank card. So my end results, well, the ceramic coasters were absolutely beautiful. So shiny. But the vitreous coasters, I didn't like. It's kind of as though the surface was slightly pitted, and the grout was going into these pits on the surface, and it just made them look nasty. I was really disappointed actually. I hadn't experienced this with the Hobbycraft tiles that I'd used before, but these tiles came from Mosaic Heaven, and I won't be using them again. So the last thing I had to do was to place some of these little felt feet onto the corners. And hey presto, done. If you do want a bit more detail on the grouting and the placing of the tiles, do go and have a look at my other mosaic videos where I do go into a little bit more depth about the process that I'm doing. But I genuinely really enjoyed this project, and I've learned a few things and I'll share them with you now. Number 1, I won't be using the vitreous tiles again, at least not the ones from Mosaic Heaven. I've got shed loads of these left, so I need to find something to do with them, so any ideas, please leave them in the comments below. Number 2, the ceramic tiles are so much easier to work with and much less fiddly to work with, and I can truly imagine any future projects that I do, I will definitely be using ceramic tiles. Number 3, do check your tiles are properly secure before you start the grouting process. Run your hands over them, wiggle them about, see if they move, and if any of them move, glue them back down again and come back to it later. Number 4, always make a few spare. If you want a set of 6 coasters, perhaps buy 8, because you can pretty much guarantee that a couple of them really won't turn out as planned. If you'd like more details on beginner mosaic crafts, do check out my video description where I've put links in for my other mosaic projects that I've done. They're much simpler, beginner friendly mosaic crafts, and I also give a bit more detail about the whole grouting process and the preparation process in them. But overall, it was a great fun little project to do, and I was pleased with the results of the ones that did work out. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this little project. Do let me know if you give it a go, and if you do have any tips or tricks to share with me, do drop them in the comments below, because they will not only help me, but they'll help other people that come along and look at this video as well. So, let's share the knowledge and let's all learn together. I'll be back with more arts and crafts very, very soon, so do subscribe if you haven't already, and I hope to catch up with you all again soon.